lady from St. Louis County from a microphone other than your own.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To inquire of the budget chair.
Does the budget chair from Jasper yield?
Yes, I do.
Please proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning, lady.
I think this is our first inquiry this year.
It is, yeah.
So this amendment, as I understand it, it would give pay raises to people who take care of our most challenged citizens. Is that correct?
Yes. Broadly speaking, it's for all state employees, and then there is a $2 per hour shift differential for those that work like the nights and weekend shifts that are less desirable. We have harder time filling those just like we would in the private sector.
I understand. So is that what this amendment does?
No. The lady's amendment would use so in the underlying bill is that money for statewide workers.
Correct. And I support that.
The lady's amendment would take money from a federal fund and apply that towards provider rates for a couple of different categories to increase the reimbursement rates that we pay for respective services.
And those individuals are not state employees, I understand.
Yes.
Yes, they are, or no, they are?
No, that is correct. They are not state employees.
Okay, so they do not get the pay raise that is in the current budget. This is...
I'm sorry, lady. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry. Is this better?
That is. Thank you.
Okay. Is this... so this money does not go to the same people that get the pay raise that's in the underlying budget, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, so we've got state employees that are being appropriated for in the underlying bill, and this would allow providers, theoretically, to increase their pay for their employees, which are private employees.
Is this a different type of work that's being done?
It's comparable, I think, in many ways, to some of the state jobs that we have.
So state workers take care of some of our most challenged citizens, and these contract workers also take care of our most challenged citizens. And the budget gives the state workers a pay raise, and the amendment gives the contract workers a pay raise. So can you explain your objection to this amendment?
Yeah, as I've already stated, there are a couple objections, but I will kind of address the question I think that you're posing. Mm-hmm. Why are we increasing pay for state workers and not for these private employees potentially? Which, by the way, I will point out that is not expressly stated in the lady's amendment, right? We are raising provider rates, so those provider rate reimbursements would go to those providers, and they, downstream of that process, would determine how much their employees make, along with paying all of their other costs associated with running their businesses. So it's not quite apples to apples, but I see the point you're making. I will remind you that in the FY23 budget, we did a lot of rate increases for these folks specifically, for those providers of our most vulnerable citizens. We did nursing home rate rebasing, we did DD rate stabilization, we've done increases to CDS, we've done, I think, without going through these line by line, I think we've increased these rates over the last couple years. Is there room for more, and is inflation rampant and a real problem for everybody? I think that's a discussion that we should continue. However, my objection to this bill at this time is that we are taking one-time money that will not be continuous necessarily for this purpose, and applying it towards those provider rates that we know will be ongoing need. And so we should generally do that with general revenue, and we should make that commitment as best we can to sustain those increases over the course of time. And so what the lady is proposing here is that we pull out some one-time money, make those rate increases, which would necessitate a second conversation later in the process that would determine whether or not we should go back and pay for them with state revenues that would be more sustainable. I think that it's kind of cart before the horse.
Yeah, I want to take also, that two parts. First
one
of
last,
all...
One last other thought is that, again, this is a supplemental budget request. We are now, week 5 into the session, week 6. We are in the middle of the budget process, and we are talking about all of these rates as a body, and as the budget committee, the subcommittees, we're all discussing these things, and it takes a little time, and we need to be careful about these increases that we make, especially on the heels of having made big increases over the last couple of years. So,
okay, so there's 3 points that I want to address that you just
Yes.
made. First of all, you're talking about how in the 23 budget we did raise the pay of these workers. I do appreciate that. I think it's necessary. We also raised state pay in the 23 budget, didn't we?
we did.
So was that a comparable raise?
I believe it is,
Okay.
you know,
And then the
with
second point
say the
is
DD
that-
rate, the DD providers, I think it is a comparable as an example.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the second point is that these are one-time funds. Now, we just heard a discussion about how these are federal funds that do come in every year, and we can count on. This is from a federal fund balance. So can you explain how these are one-time funds instead of
Yes,
ongoing?
so these are oftentimes, and part of the issue that we have with some of these fund balances is that there are many different types of funds that feed into the fund.
course.
So you can't say it's X type or Y type or Z type necessarily because it's some combination of all those things. And oftentimes that's federal reimbursement or federal grants that we get to those funds, and they all get kind of jumbled around, and then we would spend them on this particular, in this case, rate increases for these providers. So we don't know exactly where these dollars are coming from at this time, so we cannot know if they will be continuous. And if they are continuous, they are almost certainly for a different purpose, for some other program that is federally funded. And so because there's a balance that has grown over time, the lady has rightly identified that there is some room here, some money that is coming in that is not going out, and the balance keeps growing. But the original purpose of those federal funds was never to provide rate increases to these providers. And so they're not intended to do this. We don't know that they're coming back, and we don't know exactly what they are, so we cannot know that they would be sustainable.
And then, so are you saying that you're not committed to continuing these pay raises if we were to give them?
Well, lady, I want to point out to you again, we're talking about rate increases for oftentimes, I think always private entities. And
But-
what they do with this money is their decision to make. So you cannot draw a straight line between pay increases and rate increases.
So
However, I think to ask your question, and I don't mean to cut you off, but to ask your question in a way that within that definition, am I committed to these provider rate increases? Not at this time. I think we need to discuss it. I have not been able to spend enough time personally doing my due diligence to understand the lay of the land here. Another thing to consider is that there are hospital provider rates, nursing home provider rates, developmental disability provider rates, and the list goes on and on. And so we need to understand the whole picture and not necessarily the ones that are only considered in this amendment. And I'm at
Understand
work
that.
on that
And-
every day.
Okay, so can I ask for your commitment then to work to raise the pay for these contract workers that do similar work to the state employees?
I am committed to considering that.
You're committed to considering raising the pay for contract workers. Well, we pay for.
I am
we do
committed to
raise the pays for
considering
people who-
raising these provider rates.
Okay, I hope you will raise these provider rates. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
lady.
May I